The silence of the snow. In the winter of 1959, the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia stood as a frozen monument to secrets untold. The northern reaches, where the peaks of Kholat-Syakird mountain loomed under a sky heavy with snow, were no place for the unprepared. It was here, in the heart of a blizzard, that 9 young hikers vanished, their fates sealed in a tragedy that would baffle investigators for decades. The Dyatlov Pass incident, as it came to be known, was a riddle of torn tents, missing bodies. They were wet with heavy coats, sturdy tents, and a shared optimism that youth often brings. The night was clear, the stars sharp against the black sky. They cooked a simple meal, shared stories, and settled into their tents, unaware that the mountain had already begun to claim them. The Ural winter was brutal, but they were no strangers to cold. They sang as they hiked, their breath forming clouds in the air, their boots crunching through snow. Igor, Lena, Misa, Tanja, and Vera were there, their corpses strangely preserved, their eyes wide open, as if staring at something unseen. Misha's tongue was missing, cleanly severed. Tanya's ribs were shattered, but her skin was intact. Vera clutched her journal, its pages torn, the last entry a frantic scrawl. "It sees us." The townsfolk were hardy, used to the Ural's unforgiving winters, but the incident unsettled them. The local tavern buzzed with rumors, lights in the sky, footprints that vanished a hum that lingered in the ears long after leaving the mountain. Nikolai Petrov, a grizzled trapper who'd helped with the search, claimed he'd seen a figure on the slopes, a tall, thin silhouette with no face, its form blending with the snow. He swore it didn't walk, but glided, leaving no tracks. "It knows." The entries started cheerful, filled with sketches of the mountains and notes on the group's antics. But as the trek progressed, the tone shifted. It grew louder at night, accompanied by a tapping at her window, like ice cracking underfoot. She saw the figure once, standing at the edge of town, its form shimmering like heat on a summer road. She locked her doors, burned sage, and prayed, but the hum followed, burrowing into her thoughts. Vera wrote of a hum that woke her at night, a sound that seemed to come from the ground itself. She described dreams of a figure watching from the tree line, its presence heavy, like a weight on her chest. The last pages were chaotic, filled with symbols Anya didn't recognize, jagged lines, and a recurring shape like an eye without a pupil. When a search party reached the site 2 weeks later, they found a scene that defied reason. The tent was slashed open from the inside, as if the group had fled in panic. Their belongings, coats, boots, even food were left behind, scattered in the snow. But the searchers whispered of something else, a hum in the air, like static from a broken radio, and a shadow that moved against the wind. The Mansi, the indigenous people of the region, spoke of a presence on Kholat, something they called the Silent One, a force that guarded the mountain and took those who trespassed too far. Footprints led away from the camp, some bare, some in socks, heading toward a dense forest a mile away. The searchers followed, their hearts sinking with each step. Vera's journal captured it, all their banter, the way the mountains seemed to watch them, the strange stillness that sometimes fell over the slopes. Nearby, Katya and Sasha lay side by side, their faces serene but their bodies bruised in ways that made no sense, no broken bones, but internal injuries as if crushed by an invisible force. The others were missing, their tracks swallowed by snow, and inexplicable injuries, with no clear answers, only whispers of something unnatural. But the truth, buried beneath the snow, was far stranger than the mystery the world would come to know. This is not that story. Not exactly. This is what the mountains whispered when the wind fell silent. The expedition. The group was young, vibrant, and fearless students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, bound by a love for adventure and the wild. Their leader, Igor Volkov, was a wiry 23-year-old with a sharp mind and a knack for navigation. With him were 8 others. Katya, the group's photographer whose laughter could cut through any storm. Yuri, a geology student with a poet's heart. Lena, quiet but fiercely determined. Sasha, the jokester who kept spirits high. Misha, a medical student with a steady hand. Tanya, an engineering prodigy. Dima, the youngest, eager to prove himself. And Vera, the group's chronicler, always scribbling in her journal. They set out on January 25, 1959, aiming to conquer Kholat-Syakird, a trek to earn their Grade 3 hiking certification. Their plan was simple: ascend the mountain, establish a camp, and return by mid-February. On February 1st, they pitched camp on a gentle slope below Kalat, a spot chosen for its shelter from the wind. The night that broke, the next morning, the camp was silent. No one emerged to greet the dawn. They found the first bodies under a cedar tree, Yuri and Dima frozen, their hands burned as if they'd tried to claw at fire. Weeks later, when the thaw began, the remaining bodies were found in a ravine. The official report was a muddle of theories of avalanche, hypothermia, even a secret military test gone wrong. The whisper in the snow, Coldwater, a nearby mining town, became the hub for the investigation. Anya Morozova, a schoolteacher who'd known the hikers, took it upon herself to study Vera's journal, hoping to find answers. Anya began to hear the hum herself, faint at first, in the quiet moments of her classroom. The mountains claim. By March, Coldwater was a town on edge. The investigation faltered, the authorities desperate to close the case. He burned his maps and moved south, leaving his traps to rust. She saw the Silent One in her dreams, standing over the bodies of the hikers, his long fingers tracing spirals in the snow. She wrote to a colleague in Moscow, a folklorist named Victor, who warned her to stop. The town lost power, the streets buried under snow. It didn't move, but the hum was deafening, a vibration that shook the walls. The hum grew, now a sound that wasn't just heard but felt, a pressure that made her vision blur. Anya clutched the journal, its pages hot under her fingers, and began to read aloud, hoping to banish the thing with words. The symbols burned in her mind, forming a chant she didn't understand. The doors burst open, snow swirling in, and there it was, the Silent One, taller than the doorway, its form a silhouette of absence, its eyes blinding. Anya grabbed the journal and ran, the snow swallowing her footsteps. He took a single photograph, but when he developed it, the image was blank, except for two white points, like eyes staring back. The mountain, however, remembers. Kholat stands silent, its slopes hiding a presence that watches, waits, and takes. If you hear the hum, if you see the shadow in the snow, don't look back, don't speak its name, because the silence of the snow is always there, and once it sees you, the mountain will claim you forever. He burned the film and left the Urals, but the hum followed him, faint but relentless. Anya kept reading, her voice trembling, until the journal caught fire in her hands, the flames cold and blue. The Silent One tilted its head, as if listening, then vanished, the hum fading to silence. The storm stopped, the church still, but Anya knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting. Hikers stopped coming, and the Mansi refused to guide anyone near Kholat, their faces grim as they spoke of the Silent One. Strange things continued, compasses failing, lights in the sky, a hum that woke people at night. Children drew spirals in the snow, their hands moving as if possessed, and some swore they saw a figure on the slopes, its eyes glowing through the blizzard. She headed for the church, the only place she could think of, its bell tower, a beacon in the dark. Inside, she found Father Grigory, the town's priest, praying before a cracked icon. He looked at her, his eyes wide with fear, and whispered, "It's here." Anya, alone in her small apartment, heard the hum louder than ever, now a chorus of whispers that seemed to know her name. She lit a candle, its flame flickering as if caught in a draft, and opened Vera's journal. The pages were different, new symbols, new words. "Yasami, now I see you." She slammed it shut, but the candle went out, and the room filled with a cold that wasn't just winter. The town searched, but no trace of her was found, only her coat, folded neatly at the edge of Kholat, a faint smudge of ash on its collar. The investigation was buried. The hikers' deaths, a footnote in Soviet records, their story fading into myth. "The Ural has old things," he wrote, "things that don't belong to this world. They watch, and they take what they see." Anya ignored him, her obsession growing. She started carving the journal's symbols into her desk, her hands moving as if guided, but others felt the mountains pull. Anya, driven by the journal, began hiking to the slope where the tent had been found. She found traces of the hikers' shreds of fabric, a broken compass, a photograph Katya had taken of the group, its edges burned but the faces clear. In the background, barely visible, was a shadow, too tall, too thin, its head a featureless blur. The hikers' deaths were blamed on an unknown, compelling force, a phrase that satisfied no one. Nikolaya, unable to forget what he'd seen, ventured back to Kholat alone. armed with a rifle and a flask of vodka. He returned 3 days later, his hair streaked with grey, his voice trembling as he spoke of a cave he'd found, hidden behind a frozen waterfall. Inside, he said, were walls carved with the same symbols as Vera's journal, glowing faintly in the dark. At the center was a figure, the silent one, its form, a void that swallowed light, its eyes to points of blinding white. Nikolay didn't speak of it again. The hum was constant now, a drone that made her teeth ache. The night of the storm. On March 15th, a blizzard swept through Coldwater, the worst in decades. She saw it then, through her window, a figure in the storm, its form blurred by snow but unmistakable. The church doors rattled, though the wind was still. Father Grigory shouted a prayer, but his voice broke the silence that remained. Anya disappeared that night. The church was found empty, the journal reduced to ash, its symbols etched into the wooden pews. Coldwater never recovered. The tavern grew quiet, the townsfolk avoiding the mountain. Years later, a geologist found a cave behind a frozen waterfall, its walls carved with symbols that glowed faintly. The hikers were never forgotten, but their story was rewritten, stripped of its strangeness.